Lauren Groshong, welcome to the show today. Everyone tuning in, Lauren is currently in the role of GTM Recruiting Leader over at Vanta. Well, Lauren, thank you very much for joining us on the show today.
Excited to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you. Lauren, where are you from?
I am born and raised in California, specifically outside the Bay Area. Right now, I'm in Sonoma County, which is like the gateway to wine country. Hopefully, people have been there.
Yeah.
But growing up, I grew up in a really small town of West Marin. It was Woodacre. We had no like stop signs, street lights, that type of stuff. Haven't gone far, but far enough in my eyes.
Okay, gotcha. What were you like as a kid?
As a kid, I love humor. I think that's something that has rung through, and it's something that within my family. So, jokes, all jokes. Growing up, though, I was really into sports. So, soccer, basketball was my passion, but I would try everything. Grew up in, again, a really small town. And so, like, we had 12-person classrooms and things like that. So, just really deep dives into the community that was there, which was really awesome. And have maintained, thankfully, all of those friend groups, which is pretty awesome.
It seems like your personality type, from what I'm just seeing with your energy thus far, you're probably constantly on the go, playing a
Yeah.
lot of sports. You seem like a very driven person.
Definitely really driven. I got that from my dad. My dad was us kind of a small business owner, if you will, and he saw a lot of challenges in his life. He actually was in the Navy during Vietnam, and he actually fell off the aircraft carrier and broke his back and neck. And so growing up, there was like it wasn't always talked about. It wasn't like the elephant in the room, if you will, but like it was there. He definitely was in pain and things like that, but he was successful and he pushed through it. And so, like, that type of perseverance and like that work ethic and that drive was always something that resonated me. It also was like something where I think I learned very early that you have to work hard. Nothing is given. And if you want to succeed, you have to put in the effort. And so, like, that was ingrained at me in like a really young age. I took that into sports, I took that into classes, even though education's probably not like my favorite thing. But I took that dedication and just like seeing it as I need to get through it, competitive to push myself through it to kind of get to the next things that excite me.
I'm curious to get your thoughts on this, like what you said about your dad. Not necessarily, it's something it wasn't really talked about very often. And a business owner, which is an incredibly demanding career, potentially even more so, or potentially even more challenging for your dad. I wonder if one of his keys to success was the fact that it's like, even when you have challenges in life or something that is really hard for you to work through, it's not putting the focus or the emphasis on that and focusing on what you have to do. I'm wondering if that just shed some insight into your psychology and potentially his going through that hardship. Do you think that that was one of the keys that helped him be successful in business?
Absolutely. I think about it like he had multiple surgeries, was in like a bed for a couple months on end, and it was never like a feel sorry for me or like overly help me. Like he hated to be like the burden. And I think it was more of we rise despite of things. And I think that is something like I always to this day try to look at things very glass half full, be positive. I really don't even like to like turn on the news these days because a lot of things can like bring you down. But I think it really helped me like shape how I look and how I approach issues and problems and things like that, with always trying to like things happen. Let's try to not keep us weighing us down type of thing, but how do we continue to like trudge and move forward?
Yeah, 100%. He seems like he was a great mentor for you.
He was. And he has this like charisma. He is one of those, and I think that's like the humor comes into play there, which is like how I was born and raised. It's just, family first type of environment. But I think we laugh at everything. Unfortunately, sometimes if somebody were to get injured younger, like the first reaction was to laugh. I've had to not do that now in my professional life and as I've become a mom, because that's not a good thing. But it was just like one of those, like it's just how we approach things is humor. Let's laugh through it. Again, challenges, like you can have a fight, but then like laugh about it and move forward.
Yeah, I love that. Hey, so what kind of business did he have? Or I don't know if he's still
So, one of his best friends was a scientist, which is he is not scientific by any means. So the two of them coming together were like total opposites, which is great. He and his scientist best friend created it's technically like a bug that cleans contaminated soil. So they started in the US and then they actually ended up doing most of their business outside the US because the US changed their laws of how you clean, if you will, like contaminated soil. So in my high school years and college years, he did the majority of his business in Egypt and Mexico.
That sounds fascinating. So what do you mean by that? Like created a bug? Like
It's like bacteria and like food for the bacteria where they actually go in. And so like you feed the bacteria a certain, you know, recipe, if you will, and they actually clean contaminated soil. So you think of like
wow.
old gas stations and all the stuff that they leave in the soil. So you basically go in and it's an organic way to like clean the soil. You have to like rotate it and get the topsoil and things like that. But over time, this like bacteria bug eats that and then leaves very clean, fresh topsoil that you can then build on and not have that leftover contamination.
That's fascinating.
Mhm.
So you said he was working a lot in Egypt and where else?
Mexico.
Did you ever get to travel with him?
I did not. Mexico, we would go on like family vacations and then he would like go off for a couple days and go do like business and things like that. But we were left at the pool, so to speak. Never to Egypt. It's definitely on my list of places to go. He has some awesome pictures of the Red Sea and things like that. And he just has always said such positive things about the colleagues over there and like the culture and all that kind of stuff. So definitely it's on my bucket list.
I love that. Then a little later on, when you went to college, I think so you initially, well, you graduated with a degree in business marketing, right?
Mhm. My whole life, my dad is Jewish. And so growing up, I had my bubby. His mom lived really close to us. And like she was obsessed with fashion and the garment industry. And I always thought I wanted to be a fashion buyer. I was obsessed. I was pretty girly in that sense, but then also balanced the sports. But I was set on, I want to be a fashion buyer. I want to go into the fashion industry. And so I kind of picked my major as business marketing that can go across everything. I knew I wanted something a little bit more generalized. My dad has a friend who owns a business in LA, and he had kind of said, like, you can come in and you can start low, but you can work your way up here. And so it kind of had like my path, what I thought figured out and set on. So, like, my mission was go to college, have fun, but get to that next step, which is always what I've wanted to do. So, went through college, worked my way through college, held a full-time job, and I worked at a small boutique to gain insights into in Healdsburg. If ever anybody's ever gone, it's absolutely beautiful in the wine country. Small denim boutique where the creator and like the owner of it was an ex Levi's head designer. So she just had like a lot of really great knowledge. And I got to see exactly like how small businesses run from like the buying to like the cleaning the bathrooms to literally everything. And so that was awesome. And I actually had started at Nordstrom's when I was in high school on an internship and stayed on and off with Nordstrom's throughout college too. And so I ended up being there full time and I worked in like every department from like stock to lingerie to the junior section. And then the last one, I ended up being in the HR at Nordstrom's, which changed my perspective a little bit on what I wanted to do.
And then from there, when you went to Salesforce, that was your first time in recruiting, right?
Correct. So at Nordstrom's, my last role there when I was assistant HR manager for the store in Corte Madera, I was responsible for the staffing. So we have like our big holidays, you think of Christmas, but they have their anniversary sale, which is like their one of their biggest milestones for the company and where they bring in the most revenue. And so I was tasked with literally hiring like 160 people to get the store to its seasonal needs. And so I was doing all the interviewing and onboarding and all that kind of stuff. And so I wore like a lot of different hats. I did, unfortunately, firing too, but compliance, kind of like you name it. And I realized that the interviewing and like the hiring was like that gave me a lot of juices. I hated the firing, not my thing.
Um,
And I didn't like a lot of like the compliance stuff. It wasn't something that like brought me joy, if you will. And so I had a couple colleagues who left Nordstrom's as they were the frontline managers, and they went over to Salesforce. And so they actually referred me, and I was like, Salesforce, like, what is this thing? And I remember telling my grandma, and she was like, you are an idiot. You don't leave Nordstrom's. Everybody knows Nordstrom's. Who's Salesforce? And so it was just like one of those things of changing my identity because everybody in my family, I had told everybody because I was pretty crystal clear that I wanted to be a fashion buyer and go into that. And so it kind of really changed what I wanted to do in the trajectory of my career.
nice, nice. You
Hmm.
were at Grammarly for about 5 years.
Hmm.
And during your tenure, and you were in the role of head of global business recruiting, the Ukraine-Russian war broke out, and you had told me before we hit record that the founders of Grammarly are actually from Ukraine, and a lot of your team was in Ukraine from day one when the war started. Grammarly is like the category defining and leading solution for what they do, and they've continued to be so. My understanding, they still are today. I mean, I use it, and most people I know use it. I think it's really fascinating that they've been able to maintain that competitive advantage and category leading status through an incredibly brutal war in Ukraine. What was that like, right? Like working
Oof.
with the team, and how did you adapt with day one when the war broke out? Like, what was that like at Grammarly?
100%. So I would say it was definitely, I think, where I've learned the most and probably changed the most as an individual, personally and professionally, I would say. When I first started Grammarly, it was actually like, it was just all kinds of change. So like when I first started, literally my first day, it was like COVID had just hit. And so they were like, oh, we're in office. Oh, we're going to ship your laptop. You'll come in about a month. And then I never went in and we switched to like remote first. So day one with that company, it was like always leading through change and things like that. But I think it was my third or second year when the war actually broke out. The company honestly handled it fantastically. They had been monitoring it. People was their most important thing. Like I mentioned, our co-founders were from Ukraine, specifically Kyiv, Ukraine, which is where we had the office for Grammarly, and we still have the office today, which is pretty awesome. But it was wild to just basically put business aside and just literally thinking about lives and safety and well-being of your team. And it was so inspiring, honestly, to see people leading through so much in their lives and still showing up. I had an individual on my team, and when everything kind of like broke out, I was like, don't worry about work. I'm the last thing. Just keep me in mind. Please tell me we are safe and when you've made it out of the country and all these things. And I remember her saying, no, I need to work. This is like the only stable I have in my life right now. And so it was like trying to show up and support people when they were going through so much. Again, it made you realize like the little things like having a bad hair day, getting a zit, or whatever, those like little things that sometimes can bring people down really don't matter. And I think it gave me a different perspective, but it also changed my leadership and my style and kind of like how I show up at work. I try to lead with positive poly energy, right? Like I really try to do empathy first, really get to know somebody as a human first, and then integrate like the business stuff and figure out what motivates them, what gives them like psychological safety, and lead through that. Um, it's funny too, if I were to reflect back, feedback I got when I was a manager at Dropbox was I'm too empathetic. That was like a fault of mine almost as a manager, is that I lean too much with empathy when I'm leading my team. And I think it was the Times had actually, or Harvard, one of the two, put out a article, and it was about how during the time of COVID and immense change, empathy was like the top trait of like the best leaders. And that was really eye-opening for me. That was like, okay, I'm allowed to be this empathetic. I'm allowed to kind of show up as authentic as I want, and lead. And I feel like it just like it changed my tune, and I'm happy that I was able to do it. The war is ongoing. I still am very connected with a lot of the individuals. It is heartbreaking. But again, like if I were to look at back at Grammarly, I think how they showed up for their people, one, and how they led through that was like so inspiring, and honestly what kept me there for such a long time.
Yeah, I'm curious. I'm sure there was the co-founders. I'm assuming would you have all hands or meetings or
Mhm.
just the communication with the team? Were there any themes or like values or what was
Grit.
the key things you remember in terms of how they helped the team like navigate those challenges in terms of how they were communicating and trying to lift people up and support people? Are there any memories there?
I think yes, like again, Grammarly did an amazing job of the foresight into this and like the planning that they did. And so like satellite cell phones, transportation in and out, just like all hands on deck, crazy communication, like every 20 minutes, check-ins, like things like that. So like really showing up, again, safety was at the end of the day the biggest thing for us. And it was making sure that people got out if they were allowed to get out, and then the men that were enlisted, like making sure we were there to support them and support the country. Like Grammarly sponsored a couple ambulances, and seeing those go around the rubble like with the Grammarly logo brought like immense pride, and that was stuff that like you just, again, it makes all little things like that is really what's important, I would say. I remember a couple meetings too where we were doing just normal team meetings, and anybody who they're all during Zoom, they'd have to like unplug from their Zoom because the sirens would go off, and there was um, bombs and things like that flying around. And so they would all have to go into the basement. So you'd be on a Zoom, you'd see everybody, and then all of a sudden you'd see the flashings of the sirens, and then they'd disappear, and then they would show back on like nothing had happened. There were days where the sirens were going off like 24/7 for like weeks on end, and they had no sleep, but they still showed up like their authentic selves, and they were so driven, so gritty, and honestly, again, inspiring. Like the Ukrainian people are so inspiring for what they're still going through to this day.
Yeah, they really are. They truly are. Well, I think it's what you mentioned is how it fundamentally changed you as a manager and leader is really interesting. I think seeing a few things, seeing and living through hardship, as well as just doing really hard things, like
Yeah.
being a parent, right? I think that there's a level of empathy that unlocks in
Mhm.
people. And I think, at least I see for myself too, I feel like it's some of the harder things I've had to go through definitely, I think have made me more empathetic. I think being a dad is definitely like having a little girl has made me a lot more empathetic. But it's interesting, those chapters where what you experienced at Grammarly, and then also how you saw other, leadership, the founders respond must have been incredibly impactful and probably still impacts how you make decisions today, I would assume, and how you lead today.
Yeah, people first. Again, I think it's like as cheesy as it is, but it's like the one team, one dream. Like you and any company, like really, I think like they are only as strong as the employees that they hire and that they have and how they treat them. And so for me, it's actually been, I would say, a theme of how I pick companies is looking at how the leadership treats their employees. And that's like the biggest one for me. So leadership is always my thing. And that's now a lens that I really look through is I don't want to work with people. We used to say a term like brilliant jerks, right? Like they may be amazing, but they're like not a nice human. Like that's not who I want to work side by side and like pour my hours into. I want to work along people that are genuinely nice people and we're on a mission and it's exciting to do it together.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. So when it comes to now, right, you have more experience as a leader. Uh, Now you're at Vanta too, so you're on to your next leadership role. At this point, what do you think is most important as a talent acquisition leader? For other talent acquisition leaders, or even more generally, anybody who's trying to build amazing teams, what advice do you have to them? You talked about bringing people up. Could you explain what that means?
Yeah, I would say like first my biggest advice to them is for anybody in this type of role is like recruiting is only going to be successful if you understand the businesses you support. What keeps them up at night and how can we eliminate that nervousness or whatever it is. I think the people are the biggest thing and so making sure that we're bringing the right level of talent, but you have to be really in tune with the business on their wants, what's working, not working, and then like the proactiveness to get ahead of things before they happen or don't happen, whatever that kind of like would mean. And so I would say that's the biggest advice I would have for leaders specifically.
And I know also, yeah, you really also talked about understanding business needs, communicating with the different departments. It sounds like really dialing into business outcomes, right? In terms of how you shape your department and how you lead your recruiters. Can you tell us more about how you do that?
Yeah, for sure. I would say first and foremost, I think recruiting and sales walk a really, really fine line. I've always been drawn to the sales side. I specifically didn't go on the engineering side just because I like that excitement and that like that pace, if you will. That's the exciting thing. Since we do walk a fine line, I think it's sometimes talking in the language of the sales organizations that you're supporting, and showing them exactly, do you know what the end goal is? If it's revenue, if it's NRR, whatever it may be, how can we best support that? And so again, just knowing the insides and outs, so to speak, like with sales, when you're hiring people, sometimes like you have to understand that if you don't get a butt in a seat for your VP of sales, for example, like there's an open quota that they may not hit. And so you're actually like impacting people's paychecks and like the business's success. At the end of the day, that's a lot of pressure. And so you never want to be at the like the end of a finger. Like recruiting was the reason we weren't able to hit our goals or hit our quarters because they couldn't get kind of like butts in seats. And so I think like that I take that, I start with that, and then it's how do we want to show up to the business? How do we make sure we don't get to that spot from creating goals and how we report out and how our frequent communication, having, my team members like be in team meetings, be vocal, but really also be really cross functional. I think you have to have an amazing partnership with like your PVPs, with your recruiting ops, but also like the revenue ops teams, the people who create the quotas, who create the comp plans, like all the things. So again, I think it's like really being integrated and not just like one point of the business, but a lot of them to actually show up successful and more as a partner versus like a true support function, which I think a lot of people will look at recruiting and say, it's a support function. It is, but it's really necessary for a company's success.
Yeah, I think I definitely agree with you, and I've experienced this too throughout my career. And I look at my own journey and my level of impact with the companies that I help grow and within the tech industry, and it's just so different than when I was starting out, where it really was like you sort of when you're starting out as a recruiter, you almost feel like more of an order taker, right? Like you're writing down, you're doing your sourcing, to now when I think about leading hiring engagements with a lot of our customers, it's we're sitting down with the founders and the CEOs and the talent acquisition leaders, and we're talking about like business strategy.
Mhm.
And we're really trying to understand like how people fit into that. And it like really being critical about like the hiring plans and making sure that there's alignment. And I think that's just a skill it takes like years to develop, right? But
Absolutely.
it's critical. Like that's really what it takes. It takes a culture, I think, too, like of an organization to really understand that's the level that you need to be playing at to win at recruiting.
I
Um,
think different size companies too. I would say early days Salesforce started out as a recruiting coordinator, did sourcing as a full-time job, and then moved into like the full cycle recruiting. And that was 100% order taking. And that was 25 hires a quarter, don't stop, go, go, go. And then I was like, ooh, I kind of want to build. And that's what gave me that bug. And so like I think like my journey of going from large to smaller companies has been that building, taking more of that strategic leveler, if you will, and like going deeper and understanding that. And then I will say, post COVID, I mean, recruiting has seen the most rocks out of
oh my
any.
gosh, yeah,
It's
seriously.
been terrible to be
Yeah.
completely frank, right? And like having been on the other side of having to do layoffs, I want to never ever do those ever again.
Yeah.
And so I do think there's like this theme now of like do more with less, especially with AI. Recruiters are tasked with take on more roles and hire more, but with less people and try to do it faster and try to, do all these things. And so it's like, how do you one lead through that, but also how do we lean in and figure out how we can get more strategic? And again, keeping your pulse on the business and understanding what it takes and what it means. And also, like, I try to be very eyes wide open and have my team be very eyes wide open into like a bad hire will screw things up, not just costs, but like time in the business and things like that. And so again, I picked kind of earlier building kind of stage companies because I really do think it's like talent is number one and you have to get that hire right. I never want to force a hire down a hiring manager's like throat, so to speak. Like I want it to be the fit for the business. And I want all people within like the recruiting cycle. So like the RCs, if you're working with a candidate that's terrible or is rude or isn't responsive, like I want that voice. I want that echoed up. So again, the business can make the best decision on who to hire because at the end, like we want to make sure we get it right.
Yeah, definitely. So at this point, I'm curious, the when you look at your future, right? And uh, you know, recently started this new job. I guess it's coming up on a year, right?
Coming up on a year. It's
Nice.
wild.
Awesome. Yeah, time flies, right? Particularly in tech, like when you're in like a talent acquisition leadership role, it just seems like things just fly.
Yeah.
Um,
I feel like I'm day two or a veteran. It depends on the hour on like what
right.
question or ping I get. So it's great, but I love that. That's the excitement of like, again, I know I'm in the right place because like I'm excited. I don't have Sunday scaries. I sure have like Sunday wake up and I'm like, woo, we got some stuff to do this week, but it's not like, ugh, I don't want to
Right.
be here. And that's when you know you're in the right spot, in my opinion.
Yes, I love that. So hey, like I'm curious, how do you feel like your definition of success has changed over the years? What are you really focused on right
Yeah.
now?
I would say for me, I learned this earlier, I would say, but I think it's like just been cemented. Every like change I've done is like I have learned to not look for accolades. I think early days at Salesforce, like your title mattered. If you weren't getting promoted every 6 months, it was an issue. You weren't as good as your peer, and then it would just like started this spiral within you. And so I really started to like, what do I enjoy? what brings me good challenges? How can I continue to grow, and what skills or what like type of people do I want to be in front of and kind of like work with? And so that's what's really I think of like career growth for me is like again, who do I want to be in my Zoom rooms? And to like challenge myself. I love not never being like the smartest person in a room. I will never say that I am because I can always learn something from another individual. And I think I want to continue to do that. I don't know what I want to do next, if I'm going to be completely honest. I've heard a lot of people be like, you should go for like a head of talent role. I don't know that much about Eng. I've always had amazing counterparts on the EPD side. And so like I've always really stayed in my go-to-market bubble. I love go-to-market. It's the juice that like fuels me. I think if I had the right sales leader early in my career, I probably would be in a sales role. Um, so like I really don't know what next is for me or like the next step. I'm really happy with where I am, so I want to stay here for a long time. So don't worry, Siobhan, I'm staying put.
Yeah.
But definitely also just like it's continuing to again surround myself with really strong leaders that I can continue to learn from, be able to chew on like meaningful problems or challenges, whether that's like growth scale. Like right now, we're going into new markets, which is super exciting and using like a different part of my brain. There's always like these fun things that I think can kind of re-excite and, motivate.
The folks tuning in, a lot of them are leaders similar to yourself, and typically lifelong learners, usually pretty ambitious.
Hmm.
And when they're entering their prime, right? Which I told you, I said, I was like, oh, you're your prime. And you're like, I don't even know if I'm there yet, you know? So I don't know how you see that. I kind of see it the way you do. I'm like, oh, I haven't even gotten started. I've always had that, because I think that's normal for lifelong learners, right? It's like there's always that next level, right?
Hmm. Absolutely.
I want to learn from you, and I think we all want to learn from each other. And it's like, how do you think about your own personal development? Like, what are your goals, outside of your career? What's most important to you right now?
I have two small kids. So I have a about to be 7 year old and a 3.5 year old. My oldest is a girl, and then my son is the 3.5 year old. He's like my little teeny tornado, I call him right now. For me, it's really like families first. That is like the biggest one. And so like making sure I can like build a life for my children that they're happy with, right? Like they don't look back and they're like, oh, that scarred me. That is like every parent's like goal. I think I'm doing pretty well there. Haven't asked my kids for my grade yet, but we will see. But like that's like on the personal side, it's just give them the best life we can, like make sure that we can give them all the opportunities that they want and kind of need. I'm not talking like crazy lavish. I mean, we live in Petaluma, California. It's not that lavish, but like just like again, show up, be present for them. My daughter's like has these cute little like tea parties in class, or like she'll have a Valentine's Day celebration, or she had like, like their little jogathons. And I think there's like nothing more important than being able to like show up and see the smile on her face and like the pride she gets from like hugging me and like introducing me. I want to make sure that that is still like my priority and like how I show up. But then on the business side, I want to make sure that if people ask, how's Lauren doing? I hope it's, oh, she's a great partner. She's doing well. And if not, I want to make sure I can get there. And so I think like that's what fuels me. I want to do a good job wherever I am and in like whatever role I am. And so like constantly asking the feedback and things like that. One of my old bosses used to say feedback was a gift. And I always would be like, oh God, I loathe that saying. I say it all the time now.
Yeah.
And so it's just like one of those things. That's kind of how I look at things.
Yeah, for sure. I have a 6-year-old daughter. I only have one.
Fun.
Yeah, yeah, it's a fun age for sure. It's funny when you said you hadn't asked for a grade yet. That reminded me of, I don't know if you know this cartoon strip. Do you remember? Did you ever read or hear of Calvin and Hobbes?
I did not. I do not
Okay,
know.
well, Calvin and Hobbes is like it's a fun little like cartoon strip that was used to be in the newspapers. I think it was like in the 80s or something. But Calvin is like this little boy. He's like your daughter's age, I think. He is 6, something like that. And so like on some of the comic strips, like he would walk up to his dad and he would act like there was like a polling, like his dad was a politician, and he'd just walk up like, Dad, the latest numbers are in and you're underperforming. Like, you're not like doing X, Y, and Z, or people say that you really need to make this adjustment or you should find a new line of work. It's something like that. It was just hilarious. They're kind of like really cute cartoons I used to read as a kid, and now my daughter loves them. But yeah,
I'm gonna have
anyway,
to
just this
contribute.
random like thought or connection I made. It's really funny stuff.
I love that. I will say, like, my daughter was definitely like the first to critique an outfit. Mom, that is not a good look. Like those types of things, and like, their innocence and things like that. Their truth serum that they throw at you is
Oh
like
yeah.
it'll hit you at the knees, but
Oh yeah.
Again, you gotta laugh with it and move forward. Again, I think that's like how I approach life is like laugh, glass half full for sure.
Oh yeah, for sure. I'm curious. So you're a very ambitious person, right? You're driven, right? You seem like a go, go, go type of individual. Being a parent's hard, and to be good at it is very hard, right? Like when we're trying,
Oh,
yeah, it's it's kind of interesting. It's like I do truly believe like being a parent's like the hardest job in the world. And what's wild about it is that everybody has, almost everybody has that job. It's funny when you think about it from a recruiting perspective because it's like that it's incredibly challenging. I'm wondering, how do you think like finding that balance, right? And like maintaining your professional progression, but now in a place too where you clearly it's very important to you to make sure your kids have the best opportunities. It's like the first thing you brought up with your
yeah.
personal growth. So, do you have any advice to parents out there that are also like really ambitious?
I would say like the biggest thing is like be authentic to yourself. Don't apologize. I think that's like one of the biggest things. Is like I remember when I was really green in my career, and I was supporting somebody, and she became a new mom, and I was like, God, her work is slacking. She hasn't been able to do this. And then of course it wasn't until I became a mom, and I was like, oh my, the stuff you juggle, the things that are happening, like the sleepless nights, the trying to figure out feeding, and if you're working, you're pumping. Like there's just like so much more to it. And again, I think it's that empathy that like really brings it forward. And so I would say be authentic, show up and know what you need to do. I'm very big on like calendar blocking. Like I do, my son's preschool is not till 8:30, right? So like some days I'll get up and I'll take my Amia calls at 6 a.m. and then I'll get back and I'll do my APAC like ones at like 6 p.m. So I think it's just like do what you need to do, but always make sure your priorities in order. And I think it's like the communication and how you can communicate that out that is really important.
I love it. I love it. Well, Lauren, this has been a really fun conversation. Thank you so much for coming on today and sharing more about your journey and your values and how you're approaching life and your career. It's been a lot of fun.
Awesome. Well, thank you. It was been a great conversation for me as well. I appreciate it.